Okay, here's the thing. All right, I don't mind this is not happening as a perk if it just could be paired up with something that doesn't, because here's the thing, this perk has been combined in use for like with like hyper focus, which makes total sense, and like resilience, right? Because they kind of both thrive on the idea of being injured, while hyper focus is just good for just getting checks. Like, I get it, but similar to Up the Ante, which we just talked about, this is not happening needs to benefit from more than just the zone of the perk existing for what it's worth to be larger. I think that, I mean, the question of course is like, what does this perk need? You know what I mean? I think like if this perk either was possible to use in the scenario that either you're near the killer's tear radius or if you're just healthy, I feel like it just makes sense. It just makes sense to use this perk when you're not injured, because I think that it just doesn't really help you. Because no one likes to be injured when the killer's nearby. Like, whoever wants to be injured? You know what I mean? This perk works well against a plague when you have a perk that like complements the perk. But if you bring this perk by itself, like, you know, people who play the game for the first time are not going to bring this perk and then think like, oh, this could be good. You know, they just kind of bring it and then they find something else that just replaces it and it's just better. This is not happening though. It just doesn't really cut its weight for what it's worth. Because like the benefit of it obviously is that the check is bigger, so it's easier to hit. So you kind of treat it like a good skill check, but then you also have to always try to go for the great over the good. But it's still the fact that the zone isn't any bigger for everything else. Like, I think like, I don't know, I can't really think about it immediately, but the injury thing is really what like kind of kills the perk, honestly. What I think is that it should just reduce the zone of the check being failed. So if you have like a whole circle, right? There's always like a small portion of it that's like great and then good, and they just make the great portion like a little bit bigger, but they make the great portion take over the good. So there's almost like an equal amount of good and great, but the actual coverage of the circle of the check is still not any higher. So it should just turn from like an eighth circle to like a third, where you have a third circle. A third of the circle is like checkable, and it should just be 50-50 out of that third that's either good and great. I think that would be perfectly fine. That's a very simple thing, just to make the check zone larger. That's literally it. I mean, they should just be more gray area than good area anyways with this perk, but it should not just make the gray area go over the good area and then keep the zone the same. Like, it shouldn't do that. I think also what would be really cool is that the perk is unaffected by the position. I mean, I feel like that's like a direct counter to Doctor, but I want to try to make it more. I feel like it should also counter any perk that affects the check. So the check basically, when the audio skill check kicks in, it's just unaffected by any perk that the killer has that would change how that functions. So for example, like Huntress's Lullaby, it negates Huntress's Lullaby 100%. I think that's what it should do. It should just negate like Huntress Lullaby. It should negate Calorophobia. It should negate whatchamacallit. What's the other one? Like, if the Doctor has you in like level 2 of Madness, and you know how sometimes it goes backwards, it should negate that completely. Anything that involves a skill check, it should just be completely unaffected, because like you should be focused at everything that is happening with the check. It makes sense to make that a thing. I'd be actually perfectly fine with that, because I feel like it just makes it makes sense. Unnerving Presence as well, yeah, same thing. You know, any perk or power that the killer has that forces the skill check to change outside of its natural like perspective, it gets negated by this perk alone, which is not overbearingly powerful, because there's not even a lot of killers who have powers that do that, and people don't really bring a lot of perks often that do that anyways. So it's only like a helpful bonus if you just don't like getting your perks, or you don't like getting your skill checks messed with. on the perspective of either killer or survivor. Because then if you can combine it with like botany knowledge, then you get to guarantee heal people regardless of what the killer's trying to work on. Because the problem with the killer currently, in terms of like the meta and how it functions, is that the killer has the ability to regress and do stuff without even like dealing with the thing that it's regressing or dealing with. So like pain res, right, affects every generator. Every generator starts regressing, and the killer doesn't do anything to touch the gen. They just put the person on the hook. Boom, that's it, right? So there just needs to be some perks that let it counter some affectations like that. And you know, messing with the skill check meter for the survivor is not really a perk or a power that people usually end up bringing to the table. So this perk doesn't really get centered around negating powers that involve you know, the skill check. It's just a good bonus. The primary function of the perk should still revolve around the idea that the zone that you can deal with the skill check circle is just better. But the difference is that, like, in case the killer does bring something that can mess with the skill check, it gets negated. That way you can still, under stress and pressure or whatever, you can just still do a skill check. I feel like that just makes the most sense. So, because like right now, like, you know, the fact that the check is bigger, like I said, the bonus that you get from it that's like secretive is that you get a chance of hitting a skill check on the great side better, which gives you more benefits and bonuses, etc., whatever. But for what it's worth, though, it's not really the same ordeal. I think also this perk should function in a way where if a person is in proximity, that would actually be so sick, actually, where if the person is in, if there's a person near you, they reduce the sound that you make while you're injured, kind of like how Iron Will does, but not like 100% though. It should be small though, like a 25%, maybe something of the nature, because, you know, when you're by yourself and you're freaking out, then you're panicking, right? But when someone's near you, you're like, okay, like maybe there's a chance I can actually like effectively do this. This is okay. I got it. So it'd actually be really sick though if like it reduces like the sound you make when you're injured by like a portion. It should also increase the ability to repair or heal. It should be like 1%, like something small. That way like resilience doesn't like get overwritten by this perk, because resilience by itself is extremely powerful, right, because of what it provides. But this is not happening. It should still be able to have a couple of like small things that like let it still function better by itself, but also like it kind of needs teammates too, so it kind of works. So I think that like if they did, so like long story short, with this perk they basically got to add the ability where the check is larger than just 30% on the great side. The check should be larger across the whole circle. That's the first part. Second thing is any perk that affects the actual skill check circle is negated for all perks and powers from any killer. Doesn't matter. Boom. Second point, right? And lastly, if there's a person near you, like in proximity, I hit my mic, I'm sorry, then you should benefit from some things by 1%, only affected by one time when someone's like nearby. That way you can just, you know, it doesn't really, it kind of adds to the pressure against the killer, because I think that like it works. But this by itself is not good enough. All those changes would help it be a little bit better. So there it is.